Everybody should know by now that the Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte extended the Metro Manila lockdown up until May 15, and he renewed his warnings about declaring martial rule in order to contain not the virus, but the Filipino people, the Pasaway Filipino people, and the Filipino rebels. So these are the developments that we've had over the past days, and looks like the worst is yet to come. I'm not talking about the dreaded second wave of the CCP virus, but of stricter and more draconian measures that we're going to have in the future. All right, that's expected, especially that looks like the government is like behaving like a headless chicken in containing and resolving this issue. I don't know why the government is more focused on resorting to draconian measures instead of using science, instead of using health measures in order to contain the virus, to make us safe. Probably it's more, affordable for the Philippine government to resort to draconian measures because we have, of course, the facilities and the people to do that, the police, the military to do that, but not have the money to, the dollars, because we're talking about dollars. Because when I learned about the donations coming from Taiwan, they were donating like 700 test kits, and that costs like $500,000. So that's very expensive. So it's probably more economic for the Philippine government to resort to draconian measures instead of using science, instead of using health care methods, techniques, and facilities to contain the spread of the virus. Like I said before, I'm giving the Philippine government the benefit of the doubt, but as we go on with this crisis, we've seen so much abuses by the government. For example, the killing or murder of ex-soldier Mr. Winston Ragos, who, according to the military, was suffering from PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a known disorder or syndrome for ex-soldiers, not just in the Philippines but also in many countries in the West. So we've seen all these abuses of power by petty, authorities in the government, the police, the barangay officials, and it's so saddening that we've had this crisis for just a short period of time, but we've seen so many abuses, some of which are, I think, actually justified, because we've seen flagrant violations of the law as well by the Filipino people, by a few Filipinos who were blatantly violating the quarantine rules for the good of everybody. But in the case of Winston Ragos, I've seen the video. A lot of people were like quarreling against each other, especially the Dutertards, the DDS, the fanatic of the government, or Duterte, the fanatics of Duterte, versus ordinary people like us who are in the middle. I'm not Idalawan. I was, a very ardent critic of Noynoy Aquino during his reign or presidency, and I'm also a critic of Mr. Duterte. I praise him when he does some good, but of course we criticize people in power for abuses. So we've seen that video, and we know by now that the military is going to file cases against the police, and according to this report, of course, the ex-soldier, the murdered ex-soldier, will be given a hero's burial at the libingan ng mga bayani, which he deserves. And according to this report, QCPD filed homicide complaint versus the police who killed Mr. Ragos. So that's a development that we have today. And as we notice, the Philippine government under Duterte, the Duterte regime, seemed to have distanced itself from this issue. All right, because they probably know what's going on. And we've also learned that Mr. Ragos was carrying a deadly weapon, which is going to be proven in the court of law. So I'm so very not believing that claim by the police, since the police is known for planting evidence against suspects in the past. So these are the violations that we've seen so far in this country. So that's the reason why I'm very skeptical when it comes to claims like this by the police. And looks like the military is not gonna take this matter lightly, and they're gonna fight the police in order to fight for the life, fight for the memory of one of their fallen comrades. Because Mr. Ragos, despite no longer being with the military, he was still fighting. Okay, he was still a soldier fighting for his life, fighting for his sanity, as he was, suffering from PTSD, a known illness or a known disorder for military or ex-military personnel. And according to the military, he spent his 8 years of his life in the battlefield. So he should be given respect that he deserves. And I've seen so many hateful comments in fake news and very malevolent comments from DDS trying to blacken the memory of this ex-soldier Mr. Ragos in defense of the abusive police. I've seen so much of their hateful comments, very menacing comments, not just on Twitter, on Facebook, but also on YouTube comments. All right, trying to blacken, and they were like creating fake news, creating stories in order to pin the blame on Mr. Ragos, who was not in his right mind. All right, these DDS or the Turtards are evil people. They will do everything, including making stories, including making fake news in order to destroy anyone who goes against their president. But Winston Ragos, we didn't know if he was, anti-Duterte. He was just doing what he usually did that day. He went out, he had to drink Coca-Cola and to smoke. We don't know what happened after that. Why the heck the police had to use force against him, including pointing guns at him for, according to the police, violating the quarantine rules. But why did they have to use force against him? We've seen the video, and he was about to, Mr. Ragos was like about to reach for his sling bag to get something. We didn't know what that is, but according to observant, netizens, that was a mineral water. And when we've seen the picture of what were inside Mr. Ragos's sling bag, the mineral water was no longer there. And according to police, there was a paltik or improvised gun in that sling bag. So these are the things that, it's very unfortunate that we've seen all this news during this pandemic when everybody is being stressed out. Mr. Duterte should serve as the symbol of optimism, just like Mr. Trump does in the US. All right, despite being attacked by the media every day, every second of the day during his press briefings, Mr. Trump, President Trump, still exudes confidence and optimism. because he believes, according to him, I would like to be the symbol of hope for the American people. That's, the best thing that a leader should do, because everybody is being stressed out. Everybody are suffering from the virus. So the least that the government can do is to make threats against his own people. And that's what President Duterte has been doing over the past days during his no reporter press briefings. He's not even receiving or getting questions from the media, but he was there alone talking, cursing, and making threats, and making lots of insensitive and non-important or unimportant statements. We don't need threats during this pandemic, okay? And Mr. Trump, as you've seen in on YouTube, for example, he was like fighting the media every day. And let me just give you an example. All right, the media were like making fake news every day during his whenever he gives out his press briefings. Expect that the media, the fake news media, are gonna spread out fake news, and they do that every day. They don't have Bayanihan law in the US, unlike in the Philippines. I don't know why we have this Bayanihan law. Are the officials of our government so snowflakey that they cannot tolerate insults, that they cannot tolerate criticisms, or probably fake news? We've seen Mocha Austin, making all these fake news during this pandemic. So let's just see how the president of the US handles fake news or criticisms from the media.
You heard from it. I don't want to say. Yeah.
Wanted to meet. Just a quick question about that. So you haven't made any contact, though, just to make sure.
With who?
The North Koreans.
I don't want to say. I won't say that.
Okay.
We have a good relationship with North Korea. As good as you can have. I mean, we have a good relationship with North Korea. I have a good relationship with Kim Jong-un, and I hope he's okay. And somebody would say, oh, that's terrible. No, it's not terrible. I hope he's okay. And I think it was a fake report done by CNN.
That's your question.
What do you have? Go ahead. No, that's enough. Go ahead.
Can I have it? That wasn't my...
So that's how he does it. Mr. Trump, as you probably know, is an equal opportunity offender. If you try to offend him, he's gonna fight back. And he's gonna fight back forcefully. Unlike the Philippine president, Mr. Duterte, who does his Corona press briefing without any reporters, any questions being asked. And yet he's always angry whenever he does his press briefing. He couldn't even handle Mr. or former Senator Panfilo Lacson's insult. I've seen the tweet of Senator Lacson. He said, "Batukan kaya kita," and Mr. Duterte was like, oh, he was so pissed off. He went berserk over Mr. Lacson's statement. And we don't need a president like that. The president of the country is not mentally stable, and his behavior during his press briefing is showing that he's not mentally, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually stable. And a lot of footages are gonna show that. For example, this one.
Hesitate. My orders are sa police, pati military, pati mga barangay, na pagka ginulo at nagkaroon ng okasyon na lumaban at ang buhay ninyo ay nalagay sa alanganin, shoot them dead.
Alright, this shoot them dead statement of Duterte, to be fair, he's actually talking about self-defense. But all these very unnecessary words, these are unnecessary. His threats, his menacing words, these are unnecessary. These are non-essential statements during the pandemic. I thought we're for essential activities and goods and etc. And the president is acting like a non-essential commander-in-chief during this pandemic. That's just my opinion. I might get, some reprimand from the DOLE or from the government for saying that, but this is my opinion. The president is or has been saying a lot of non-essential statements during this pandemic, and that's the least thing that we need as a Filipino people fighting these threats of the CCP virus. And he even said the last day when he declared the extension of the lockdown or the quarantine rules up until May 15 this.
Let me be very clear on this. If itong lawlessness which was imposed on us by the NPAs for the longest time, 53 years, baski saang probinsya may NPA. Kanina o kahapon, dalawang army nag-escort para i-deliver ang supply sa mga tao, pati pera, pinatay ninyo. If that is not lawlessness, what is that? I might declare martial law.
All right, so he's been threatening the declaration of martial law ever since this pandemic has begun. And this time he's declaring martial law. He's threatening martial law because of the threats coming from the NPA, to be very fair. But you don't have to declare martial law to do that. Why not just mobilize the army or the military to deal with these NPA rebels? And let's not forget that the Philippine president, Mr. Duterte, was friendly to the NPA or to the communist rebels during the start of his administration. In fact, he was even endorsed by Joma Jose Maria Season, and because of that, Mr. Duterte offered to share the government with the NPA rebels. But then I thought Mr. Duterte was a useful idiot that time. He was nearly a useful idiot, because he was like trying to appease the NPA or the communists. He was trying to appease them. He thought that he could reason with this communist rebels, and he realized that that's not possible. And Mr. Duterte himself said that he is a socialist, he's a leftist. But we know that not all leftists are communists, because according to Nelson Mandela, a communist is a member of a communist party of each country. So communism is like a membership, for the leftists. So you may be a leftist, but you are not a communist, because you're not a member of a communist party. And there is one communist party in the Philippines, and there's also a communist party in China, and the communists are member of the CCP in China. So that's the difference. So Mr. Duterte is a leftist, but he's not a communist, because he's not a member of Mr. Joma Season's party, the Communist Party of the Philippines. So that's just another story that we're going to tackle in the future.